Hi everyone, I'm Beja. I'm a member of the White Noise Collective based out of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. You can find out more about us at conspireforchange.org. Today's video offers a little background on the foundations of the police that we have today as a way to support our other conversations. It's one part of a series in which we will explore some patterns and histories related to the narrative of the white woman and her role within systems of violence. Not to center her experience, but to hold her accountable and learn the lessons we need to learn. As white women, many of us have been taught to trust the police and have learned to turn to them for safety, and we need to think critically about these lessons. You can also check out our videos on what do we mean by white woman, what is the virtuous victim narrative, where is white womanhood within systems of violence, and hysteria and male insecurity. In Europe and the US, modern policing began through the evolution of systems like the constables, night watches, and slave patrols. We're going to talk first about the slave codes and slave patrols. Much like the systems we are fighting today, slavery didn't just end because people in power woke up one day and realized it was wrong. It ended because enslaved people and their allies continued to rebel against it through escapes, uprisings, underground railroads, maroon communities, work slowdowns, building up the abolitionist movement, and making it politically and economically unsound to allow it to continue. Numerous rebellions and insurrections took place in North America during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Initially, indentured servants from Africa and Europe worked and plotted together, and there were many planned and executed rebellions in which people of multiple classes and races rose up, creating an incredible threat to the status quo. In response, the ruling class passed slave codes to institutionalize the racial caste system, thereby dividing the races and making them easier to control. The slave codes, mostly created between 1639 and 1833, did such things as abolish indentured servitude and legalize permanent chattel slavery only for Africans, while continuing the system of indentured servitude for those from Europe, now deemed white. It also made it illegal to teach an enslaved person to read, write, or spell, forbade marriage between the races, created stiff penalties for white servants caught consorting with enslaved Africans, and forbade enslaved people from gathering into groups. The slave codes attempted to create an environment of terror, constant surveillance, and isolation, especially as the plantation system developed and the population of enslaved peoples in the U.S. skyrocketed. All colonies had laws to criminalize, control, and return enslaved people. Congress institutionalized this system of control on a federal level, creating the Fugitive Slave Laws of 1793 and 1850. At first, incentives such as tobacco and money were offered to urge whites to be more vigilant in the capture of enslaved people who were running away. When this approach failed, slave patrols were formally established, mostly composed of working and middle-class white citizens. Though they had many functions within the community, they had one fundamental job: to prevent and defend against a slave rebellion. The first organized police forces were the slave patrols. The violence of slavery was condoned for over 200 years, but when enslaved peoples rose up to fight this system, it was their violence that was condemned by society. An American physician even went so far as to say that the desire for enslaved people to flee captivity was caused by a mental illness. But there is nothing sick in the desire to escape oppression. We can see how these institutions, both official and vigilante, have evolved into today, and the ways in which they continue to create environments of terror and surveillance in an attempt to maintain the status quo of white supremacy and to suppress those who seek to transform society. So while slave patrols were becoming institutionalized in the South, and slave codes were being enacted on both state and federal levels, Night watch patrols were also being evolved. In northern urban areas, there was also a focus on control of the working class, as the Industrial Revolution drew ever-increasing numbers of people from the countryside into rapidly expanding cities. In New York, for example, there was a colonial ordinance that said that working people could only be on the streets when they were going to and from work. Within these growing populations, inequality was also quickly growing. The desire for profit led to the exploitation of workers through long hours, dangerous working conditions, child labor, and low pay. This in turn led to unrest. Starting in the 1830s, a chain of uprisings triggered by race, religion, and labor disputes swept across various cities in the North. For disenfranchised workers, strikes and riots became the only way to express discontent, not just over low wages and working conditions, but over a lack of economic and political power. This obviously meant a threat for corporate elitists and their government allies, who responded by assigning their night watch patrols the riot control function, giving them legal authority to maintain order through use of force. They labeled the people who were fighting for economic security as enemies of the state. This gave the illusion that order was being maintained under the rule of law, not at the whim of those with economic power, and was used as justification to carry out massacres of those participating in and organizing the strikes. Eventually, these patrols transitioned from volunteer to full-time forces. Again, we bring up this history to help us understand that the systems of policing that we have today have always been grounded in racism and classism, and in an attempt to divide and control those who fight against their oppression. The question is just whether we are willing to see this history, to see ourselves positioned within it, and to do something about it. Please click to watch our next video to learn more, and please share your ideas below and in community.